العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين وانفعنا بالقرآن والذكر الحكيم اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا بما ينفعنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا واصلح لنا شأننا كله لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك اللهم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, we'll go straight into the topic today, Yajuj wa Majuj. So Yajuj wa Majuj, obviously they're one of the major signs of the before the end of time. And we're going to look first of all, what does the Quran say about Yajuj wa Majuj? So these are one of the few of the major signs that are explicitly mentioned in the Quran in two surahs. The first surah is Surah Al-Kahf, and then there's a brief mention in Surah Al-Anbiya. Surah Al-Kahf, obviously, I'm sure you're aware, is of special significance when we study the end times, because it's specifically mentioned in many hadiths that Surah Al-Kahf is the protection from Dajjal, from the fitna of Dajjal. So therefore, Surah Al-Kahf is a vital surah. So when we look at Surah Al-Kahf, we find it's just a side note. You know, Surah Al-Kahf is right in the center of the Quran. So it's like a cave, you know, in the center. It's right in the center, of the middle of the Quran. So when we look at Surah Al-Kahf, we find here the story of Dhul-Qarnayn and the mention of Yajuj and Majuj. So just briefly, these are the ayahs that talk about this. They will ask thee about Dhul-Qarnayn. Say, I shall recite unto you a remembrance of him. Dhul-Qarnayn is obviously the man who is given this dominion by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over the east and the west. And in other words, he was given a great power by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are discussion amongst the Mufassirun. Was he a prophet or was he a righteous man? So that we don't know for sure if he was a prophet or if he was just a very righteous man that Allah had given this dominion to. So Allah says, then we made him strong in the land and gave him to everything a road or a sabab. The Quran, Inna makkanna lahu fil ard. We established him on the earth. We gave him power on the earth. And وَآتَيْنَاهُ مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ سَبَبًا. Sabab is a means, literally, rather than a road. It can be a road, because a road is a means to getting somewhere. But literally, sabab is a means or so it could be a route or a road as well. Here they've translated it road. فَأَتْبَعَ صَبَبًا. He took a road until he reached the Maghrib al-Shams. He came to the place where the sun sets. And he found it setting on a muddy spring. And found some people there. Allah said to him, O Dhul-Qarnayn, either you can punish these people or you can show them mercy. What does Dhul-Qarnayn say? So this is when he's traveled west, right, to the Maghrib al-Shams. he says, the person who does wrong, I'll just paraphrase, those who do wrong amongst these people, I will punish them. And then when they return back to Allah, He will punish them even a worse punishment. And those who are good and who believe, we will reward them and we will make things easy for them. So this was the way that Dhul-Qarnayn was dealing with these people in the West. You know, if they believe and do good works, we'll reward them. If they do bad, then we'll punish them. This is just basic justice. Then the Quran says, then he followed a road. So then he went a different direction. حتى إذا بلغ مطلع الشمس, until he reached the rising of the sun. So he went to the east, to the furthest east where the sun rises. And he found it rising on a people who Allah had not given any protection from the sun. لَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُمْ مِنْ دُونِهَا سِتْرًا. Allah says, these people, He didn't give them anything to cover them, sitr, cover them from the heat of the sun. Right? كَذَلِكَ, thus it was, and we knew all concerning Him. ثُمَّ أَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا, then He followed another path. Now in this occasion it doesn't say which direction. حتى إذا بلغ بين السدين, until he came between two mountains. He found on the side of the mountains a certain people that could barely understand a word. They said, O Dhul-Qarnayn, Inna Ya'juj wa Ma'juj mufsiduna fil ard. The Ya'juj and Ma'juj people are causing corruption upon the land. Here he says, spoiling the land. Mufsidun, ifsad. So, we will give you some tribute, we'll pay you if you will help us to put a barrier to get rid of these people, because they're completely corrupting people. You know, they're destroying everything and so on. Dhul-Qarnayn said, look, I don't want money from you. What Allah has given me is much more. Allah has already given him everything, dominion over the east and the west. So I don't ask you for any payment for this. I'll do it. You know, just help me, give me men, and I will help to build a radam. In the Quran, radam, a barrier between you and these people, the Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Atuni zubar al-hadid, bring iron, bring me pieces of iron. حتى إذا ساوى بين الصدفين. So he then built a barrier of iron between the Sadafain, it says here cliffs. The Sadaf literally is like, you know when you have a shell and you open a shell, the two sides are called Sadaf. So he built a barrier between these two cliffs, you could say, or mountainsides or something. Then he said blow, so when you melt iron, you use a furnace. So that was heated up until it became a fire. He said, bring me molten copper to pour on there. So then the iron barrier was covered with molten copper. The Ya'juj and Ma'juj people were unable to go over the barrier, and they were unable to go pierce through the barrier. He said, this is a mercy from my Lord. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي جَعَلَهُ دَكَّةً. When the promise of my Lord comes, He will destroy this barrier. وَكَانَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي حَقًّا. the promise of my Lord is true. فَتَرَكْنَا يَوْمَئِذٍ بَعْضَهُمْ يَمُوجُ فِي بَعْضٍ. On that day, we will let some of them surge against others. That's what Allah says about when the barrier is destroyed. A very, very brief description is given. What will happen after the barrier is destroyed and Yajuj and Majuj are released? A very, very brief description is given. وَنُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ. Then the trumpet will be blown. So Yawm al-Qiyamah. So there will be when the promise of Allah comes, the barrier is destroyed. Yajuj and Majuj are released. All we know from the Quran is what will happen. Actually, we know something else from Surah Al-Anbiya, which we'll come back to. But in this ayah, all it says is, we will release them to surge, some of them to surge against others. Interestingly, not that the Yajuj and Majuj will surge against human beings on the planet, but they will actually be fighting each other. Some of them will be surging against others. Obviously, I spent a long time trying to research into the meaning of Yamuj, surge. It's from the root word moj, the same word as wave. You know how a wave, a tidal wave comes and crashes? Literally, that's Yamuj. It's to surge like a wave. So they'll be clashing like waves against each other. And we'll come back later to how other descriptions about Gog and Magog, how they have massive wars. They have massive wars against each other and against other human beings. نُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ. Then the trumpet will be blown. In other words, obviously that will be the last day of the Qiyamah. So then in Surah Al-Anbiya, we have these two ayahs. Once again, I don't have time today to go into the context within the surah, but that's obviously something very important for people to look into. How do these two ayahs fit into the actual surah itself, Surah Al-Anbiya? But what Surah 95 and 96 in Surah Al-Anbiya, we have the following. وَحَرَامٌ عَلَى قَرْيَةٍ أَحْلَكْنَاهَا أَنَّهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ. It is haram, it is forbidden. Here it says a ban. It is forbidden upon a town which we have destroyed that they will ever return to that town. حَتَّى إِذَا فُتِحَتْ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ هَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. Until Yajuj and Majuj, Gog and Magog are released and they descend from every hill. Every hill. Hadab is literally any elevated place on the earth, is a hill. Translated here, Hadab is any elevated place. In other words, the Yajuj and Majuj will be everywhere. They will spread around the whole world. Then the true promise will draw nigh. Okay? So we're going to come back to these ayahs later on to analyze them in more depth. But before we go into that, I want you to have a quick survey of what does some of the hadith mention about Yajuj and Majuj, just so that we're aware before we go into further study. I've just picked Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim here for the obvious reason that these are these books have got the most stringent criteria before they include a hadith. All of the ulama agree upon that, Because once again, as we saw with the beast, you can get many narrations, some are weak, some are very weak, some are stronger, some are very strong. And people can, like if, for example, if you pick up Ibn Kathir book, that's quite well known, translated into English, Signs of the Day of Judgment. It's in all the Islamic bookshops. People have probably read it. You may end up with some confusion because Ibn Kathir will bring hadith from many different sources. Some are stronger, some are weaker. And as lay people, we won't know how to understand, we're different. And you'll read so much different things that you just may end up in more confusion. So it is very important to, first of all, go to the Quran. The Quran is obviously, even though the information in there may be succinct, it's going to be the most valuable information that we have. And then we go to the hadith, which are the most strongest, which we can have most confidence and reliability with, right? And Bukhari and Muslim are obviously the ones that are. So if Bukhari has, he's got a chapter, Yajuj and Majuj. So he's only going to bring the hadith about Yajuj and Majuj, which he believes are the really strong, reliable. He knows the others, he knows all of the others. Don't forget, Imam al-Bukhari probably memorized somewhere around 500,000 or more hadith. He had in his own memory and collection. But he only put a few thousand into about 9,000 into the saheeh, and only about 1,500 if you take away repetition. So from all those hundreds of thousands, he's brought these very few that are the most reliable information we have about Yajuj and Majuj from the Prophet, right? So bear that in mind. So this is the first hadith. The Prophet said, the people will continue performing Hajj and Umrah even after the appearance of Yajuj and Majuj. And then Shoba adds an extra point. The Day of Judgment will not be established until the Hajj is abandoned. Second hadith. Second hadith. Zainab bint Jahash, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, said, one day the Prophet ﷺ came to her in a state of fear and said, none has the right to be worshipped but Allah. Woe to the Arabs from a danger that has come near. An opening has been made in the wall of Gog and Magog like this. And he made a circle with his thumb and his index finger. Zainab bint Jahash said, O Allah's Apostle, shall we be destroyed even though there are pious persons among us? He said, yes, when the evil will predominate. So even if there are still pious people, when the bad people predominate or evil and wrongdoing and sin predominates, then the people can be destroyed. The reason why she was asking is because when Allah's punishment comes upon a people, it doesn't spare anyone. It doesn't matter if you're righteous or unrighteous, you're all destroyed. That's just the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, if He wanted, He could only destroy some people but not others, but it's the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When His punishment comes, it's complete. That's why either those people have to leave, like with Lut, he had to leave that town before the punishment comes. Or Allah's punishment is delayed, for those people. Abu Huraira narrates that Allah has made an opening in the wall of Yajuj or Majuj, and once again He made the symbol of the hole. So as we will see later, what we're going to be arguing is that the barrier has already been destroyed. The barrier has already been breached by Yajuj and Majuj, and these are the proofs for that. Yeah? Now this is a long hadith, which we're just going to sort of summarize. This hadith is about on the Day of Judgment when Allah sends people into the hellfire. So here, from every 1,000, take out 999. So when Allah is sending people to the hellfire, He says from every 1,000 human beings, 999 will go into the hellfire. Only one from 1,000, in other words, goes to Jannah. So this is where the Sahaba became very concerned. The Sahaba became very fearful. They said, from every 1,000 human beings, only one gets to Jannah. We're doomed, we're doomed. And then this is when the Prophet ﷺ said, rejoice with glad tidings. One person will be from you and 1,000 will be from Yajuj and Majuj. In other words, a vast number of people are going to be from the people of Gog and Magog. And this is also one of the major proofs that Gog and Magog are human beings from these hadith that talk about, and as you see, they come in multiple chains of narration, that on the Day of Judgment, the people that go into the hellfire, the majority of them actually will be from the Yajuj and Majuj people. Then Imam Bukhari narrates again from Zainab bint Jahash, the same hadith we had before. Why is he narrating it again, the same hadith? Because he's bringing it from a different chain of narrators. So often when you read Bukhari, he brings the same hadith in different places. Sometimes he does this because of different fiqh points that you can take from the hadith. So he brings it in different chapters. But if you look at the isnad, normally he'll bring a different isnad as well. So he's killing two birds with one stone. He's showing the different ahkam or the different rulings we can take from the hadith. But at the same time, he's bringing different chains of narrators to show you that the hadith is very strong. So the same hadith he brings with different isnads. When Zainab, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, said, today a breach or a hole has been made in the barrier of Gog and Magog. Yeah? This is what Sheikh Imran Hossein argues. That it doesn't necessarily mean that's a size, that's like it's just indicating the hole. You know? There's a hole made in that barrier. Once again, from Ibn Abbas. So you see how Bukhari is bringing different chains, different Sahaba who are narrating the same thing. That there's been a hole, there's been a breach in the barrier of Yajuj and Majuj. Then he brings from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, another famous narrator. And this is another narration about the 999. Where the Prophet ﷺ said that most of them will be from Yajuj and Majuj. Good news is that 1,000 will be from Gog and Magog. Next hadith we have, so these are literally, I'll put the whole chapter on Gog and Magog from Bukhari and Muslim here. So I haven't been picking and choosing or anything like that. Just to show you that these Imams, these are the hadiths from all the thousands that they thought were the strongest on this subject. Right? Once again, he brings another narration, another chain of narration from Zainab bint Jahash. Today a breach has been made in the barrier of Gog and Magog like this. This is the correct translation. And then again, the same hadith by another narration. So the purpose of bringing the narrations is to show you that there's multiple narrators. It's not just come from one person, from one person, from one person. This has come through many people from Zainab and even from other Sahaba as well. Okay, and again, same, but this time from Abu Hurairah, another chain. A hole has been opened in the barrier of Gog and Magog. And then a different narration here, an important hadith which also comes through different chains. In this hadith, Jabir narrates that Gog and Magog would walk until they reached the mountain of Al-Khamar. It is a mountain of Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem. And they would say, we have killed those who are upon the earth, let us now kill those who are in the sky. And they would throw their arrows towards the sky, and the arrows would return to them besmeared with blood. And in the narration of Ibn Hajar, I have sent such persons that none would dare fight against them. Allah says that. I have sent such persons that no one can fight against these people, the Gog and Magog. The same hadith from Zainab through another chain. And again, we're on Sahih Muslim now, aren't we? So this is now Sahih Muslim we're going into. This is the last hadith from Bukhari. So here we've gone into Sahih Muslim now. First hadith, so Sahih Muslim, he also brings the hadith of Zainab bint Jahash. Another narration from Zainab. And then he brings from Abu Huraira as well, the one with the barrier has been breached. Then he brings a hadith from Hudayfa ibn Usayd al-Ghifari. He said, when Allah's messenger came to them, he said to them, what are you talking about? The Sahaba said, we were talking about the last hour. And the Prophet ﷺ said to them, it will not come until you see 10 signs. And he made mention of the signs, the major signs. The smoke, Dajjal, the beast, the rising of the sun from the west, the descent of Isa alayhi salam, Yajuj and Majuj, and landslides in 3 places, one in the east, one in the west, one in Arabia, at the end of which fire would burn forth from Yemen. These 10 signs are not given in order here, by the way. Then he brings the next narration of similar, where the 10 signs are mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ. And then this is a very long hadith. Obviously, sorry you can't read that, but I'm just going to once again summarize it. Some of you may be familiar with this hadith. It is an important hadith because this gives somewhat of a sequence of some of the major signs. So this is the hadith where we have about Dajjal, when he will come for 40 days. We've already done the Dajjal class, so we won't repeat that again. But the important thing here is how Dajjal will be performing these miracles, so-called miracles that will seem like miracles. He will then eventually, as you know, Dajjal will be killed by Prophet Isa alayhi salam. Right? Prophet Isa alayhi salam will descend upon the white minaret on the eastern side of Damascus, it says here. So in Damascus, if you go to the Grand Umayyad Masjid in Damascus, there is a minaret where people believe that is where Prophet Isa alayhi salam will descend. There are also other opinions that it will actually be in Jerusalem, that he will descend in a masjid in Jerusalem. So there's 2 opinions amongst the ulama. In this narration it mentions Damascus. Anyhow, when Isa alayhi salam descends, he will then put an end to Dajjal, who will be a tyrannical world ruler, right? Who will have an army of Jews. So Isa alayhi salam will kill him, and this is when Allah will send the Yajuj and Majuj against Prophet Isa alayhi salam and the believers that are with Prophet Isa alayhi salam. And Prophet Isa alayhi salam and the Muslims that are with him will be unable to fight the Yajuj and Majuj because of their strength. Right? Allah will send such a people that no one has the strength to defeat except Allah Himself. So eventually, as this hadith says, Isa alayhi salam will then make this special supplication, a special dua that he has been given that will be guaranteed to be accepted. And he will make dua for Allah to defeat the Yajuj and Majuj. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send these insects or tiny creatures that will infect these people, and there will be mass death of them through Allah's punishment. And after the Ya'juj and Ma'juj are wiped out, I'm not going to go into every detail of the hadith, then there will be a phase where Prophet Isa will live upon the earth as a righteous ruler, and there will be a lot of peace and prosperity, and he will govern according to the Sharia of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He will not bring a different teaching or a different religion. He will govern according to the Quran and the Sharia of Islam. And eventually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send the wind. There will be a certain wind, and all the believers who smell that wind, there will be a fragrance. They will die very peacefully. So then that is how Allah will end Prophet Isa and all of the believers on the earth. They will be taken away, their souls will be taken away by this fragrant breeze. And only disbelievers will remain upon the earth after that time, until the Day of Judgment. Only disbelievers. So in the narration it says they'll be committing fornication and living like animals until the trumpet is blown. This is why last time when we talked about the beast, according to this narration, it wouldn't make sense that the beast comes after Prophet Isa and Ya'juj and Ma'juj, because after Prophet Isa there will be only disbelievers upon the earth until the Day of Judgment. And we know when the beast comes, it will mark people, mu'min and kafir, believer and disbeliever. So the beast must come at a time when there are believers upon the earth. And then he brings the hadith that we saw before about Bayt al-Maqdis, that the Ya'juj and Ma'juj will go to Jerusalem. And then they will say, we have killed all those who are upon the earth, let us now turn towards the heaven. I have sent such persons that none would dare to fight against them, or none can defeat them. So those are the hadiths that are in Bukhari and Muslim. So we've gone through the ayat of Quran regarding Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and we've gone through the hadiths that are in the two strongest books of hadith. So now we're going to go to the analysis of this thing. And I'm going to present it to you today in the journey that I went through. I thought that might be the most straightforward, interesting way to do that. I'm taking you back now to when I was in Syria doing my studies. And one of the things I, for a long time, was thinking about and interested in reading about was this the command of Jihad in the Quran. Because the Quran has got a very strong command for believers to do Jihad. I'm talking about the military Jihad now. O you who believe, when you meet those who disbelieve in battle, turn not your backs to them. Whoever on that day turns his back to them, unless it is a strategy of the battle, or they are retreating to join another force, a Muslim force. So they're not fleeing, from the battlefield, they're going back to regroup or join other forces to rejoin the battle. But if you just flee from the battlefield, from the disbelievers, he truly hath incurred wrath from Allah, and his habitation will be hell, a hapless journey's end. So we are forbidden from running from the battlefield in this ayah without any restriction, So that was something, I used to think about. And then in the further ayahs, further down in the same surah, Surah Al-Anfal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put some restrictions on that prohibition. So the prohibition to run from the battlefield, Allah put some sort of restriction on that. And he does it in two ayahs, interestingly. The first ayah, he says, if there are 20 Muslims, I'm just giving the meaning, you can see the translation there. If there are 20 Muslims, they can defeat 200 disbelievers. And if there are 100 Muslims, they can defeat 1,000. 20 will defeat 200, and 100 will defeat 1,000. In other words, if you're outnumbered, how many? 1 to 10. If you're outnumbered even 10 times to 1, you can defeat them. That's Allah's promise in the Quran. If you have sabr, if you are patient and persevering, if you have sabr, Allah will make you defeat these people. But then the next ayah is interestingly, he says, Allah has lightened your load, for He knows that there is a weakness in you, the believers. So what's the lightening? He says, if there are 100 believers, they can defeat 200. If there are 1,000, they can defeat 2,000. So much less, 2 to 1. Now when the Sahaba were going into battle, you can see this from the Seerah, they were going on the first ayah. Even after the Prophet ﷺ, if you read the battles of like Khalid ibn al-Walid, you can see they were always thinking, as long as they're not over 10, even if there's 10 times more, we can defeat them. But this is for the likes of weak people like us, right? That Allah's given us, if there's over double of their number, you can run. You can leave the battlefield. You're no longer forbidden to flee or surrender, in other words. But if there's less than double, you have to fight. You have to fight. You have no excuse. So the reason why I was thinking about this a lot was, obviously in today's day and age, we've got high advanced weaponry, bombs, missiles. And when I spoke to shuyukh and things like that, about some of the jihads that were going on in those days in Palestine, Kashmiri and things like that, and when Afghanistan was invaded, etc. The ulama, the sheikhs that I was speaking, they were saying, look, they don't want people to come there to fight for them, because they've got numbers. The Muslims in those places have got a lot of numbers. They've got people, but they don't have weapons. They don't have the weapons. And in fact, the people who are invading them and destroying them have got less numbers than them, but they've got the far advanced weaponry. So this is something that I thought, how does this then, does it apply in this day and age to weaponry? But then one day I came across in a famous book by Sarakhsi, the Mabsut. Imam Sarakhsi is one of the leading Hanafi scholars of the quite early period, Abbasid period. And he wrote a very famous encyclopedic work called the Mabsut. And I found in the Mabsut that he actually directly addresses this issue. And he actually says very clearly that if the enemy has overwhelming superiority in weaponry, that will also apply then as a qiyas, as an analogy from the ayah. Because the ayah only talks about numbers being double. But he says this the same principle would apply. And in that case, the Muslim do not have to fight. They can surrender. So this led me to understanding, or coming to my own conclusion, that talking about jihad against countries like America is pointless. Because there's absolutely not even near parity in the weaponry. I mean, Pakistan now is the only Muslim country that has got a nuclear weapon. But all these other countries, they can't. How can you fight when they're fighting you by not even using all their force? They're fighting you by not even using all the weapons that they have. I mean, that's the situation you're in. One of my students, one day, came up to me and said, "Oh, have you heard of Sheikh Imran Hossein?" I said, "No, I've never heard of him." This is going back about, before I wrote the paper on Gog and Magog, it must be about 10 years back. I've never come across him. He said, "Oh, you should read some of his stuff. He's on YouTube and everything as well." He gave me a couple of his books. I had a quick flick through, but I didn't really think much of it. I just thought, just one of these people that talks about Gog and Magog and Dajjal and all that, getting a lot of viewers. And, I didn't have any particular thing about that. But from time to time, because the books were there, I just was flicking through a couple of pages here and there. I can't remember, maybe I watched a part of a video or something. But anyway, the thing that was said was, the thing that came across to me very strongly was two things, He said, the barrier's already been broken. Gog and Magog are Western civilization, that have overrun the world, they've taken over the world, just as the Quran predicted. And there are people, as Allah says, I will send forth some people that no one will be able to defeat. So that's why it was all connecting back to that whole conclusion that I'd come to myself about America and the weaponry and all of that stuff. I mean, this is what I was hearing. And I didn't, obviously at first I didn't just say, "Oh yeah, that's true." I was like, "Well, that's interesting," but I left it. I just buried it. I didn't, for probably a good few months, maybe a year, I didn't do anything further with that. I just thought it sort of makes sense in a way, But obviously, a lot of other things weren't making sense, because Ya'juj and Ma'juj, the barrier, they're going to come out after Prophet Isa alayhi salam fight. If they've come out, where's Prophet Isa alayhi salam, for example? Going back to the other hadith. So it was just something I was thinking about. I've mentioned this before. Sheikh Hamza, obviously, he said himself, this is an area that I've really gone into, the Akhir al-Zaman, the eschatology or the signs of the last day. And in one time he said, I've really thought about Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Because someone asked him, where's Ya'juj and Ma'juj, where's the barrier? And he said, I've thought a lot, but I've not been able to come to any answer to that particular issue. So when some people often they say, for example, the Great Wall of China, maybe it's the Great Wall of China, now the Chinese are coming out, maybe they're going to take over America, so that they'll be released from the Great Wall, So people have all sorts of theories, but there is a valid question, nowadays in this age of modern satellites, we can see the globe. Where is the barrier? Where are these people? Are they in some sort of hidden realm, underground, or we can't see them? If they are still behind a barrier, which is what most people believe today, right? If they're still there, trapped behind the barrier, where is it? Where are they? Why can't we see them on the satellites or things? I mean, that doesn't add up to me, but these are the sort of things people come out with, They're trying to figure out where is that wall, where is the barrier, But yeah, so this is when I sort of heard Sheikh Imran saying Gog and Magog are the Europeans, white Europeans who colonized colonial empires, and then it's America, the same people. They've created this white world order. I don't really like, we're not racist people or anything, but it can be danger of getting into racism, but we need to be careful. They are but they are a very multi-ethnic group as well, So I don't believe it's a genetic race thing. I just want to make that clear. I believe they are a civilization, a people, They have a world view. People of any race can join that civilization, and it's become globalized, So anyone who joins their way of beliefs, ways of thinking, dress, everything, they become part of the Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And I think for me that makes sense, because remember the hadith about 1,000 from every human beings. 1,000 to 1 will be Yajuj and Majuj. And we know today, living on the earth today, there's about 7 billion. There's more human beings on the earth today than if you add up all human beings in the whole of history. So if you add up all human beings from Adam to before this time, there's much less in number than what is alive today on this planet. So that then makes sense, that the Yajuj and Majuj will be 1,000 and the people of Jannah will be only 1. This is a massive number of people living today, and they've come under the world order, the Yajuj and Majuj world order. I cannot believe it's a race thing, because many of that race can become Muslims as well. If Yajuj and Majuj are human beings, a human being can become a Muslim. You see what I mean? So it's not a race thing. It should never become a race thing, and it's not a racist thing. It's a civilization. You know, it's a civilization with a world view and a culture. So over time, I'm talking about months now. You know, this was buried in my head. This idea of Yajuj and Majuj, Western. It just, the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. You know. And Imam Hossein, Imran Hossein, he brings a quote from Iqbal. Allama Iqbal has got a poem where he has these verses, and he says the following: with cleverness / wisdom and prudence, this uproar, this chaos cannot be delayed, because وَقَدْ كُنْتُمْ بِهِ تَسْتَعْجِلُونَ, quoting the ayah of Quran, that the disbelievers, they said to the Prophet ﷺ, well, bring the punishment on us if you dare. وَقَدْ كُنْتُمْ بِهِ تَسْتَعْجِلُونَ. You want to bring this, you know, you're saying you want to bring the punishment of Allah quickly? Yajuj and Majuj, Gog and Magog, all have been released. The Muslim eye will see the meaning of yansilun. وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. They will come down from every hilltop. Yansilun is come down, the word. So he's brought that word from the ayah of Quran about Yajuj and Majuj. So this was Allama Iqbal. Also seems to be suggesting here that Gog and Magog have been released. If we look at the hadith once again, this is the key hadith. As you saw in Bukhari and Muslim, this was the predominant hadith about Gog and Magog. Again and again, different chains. That the Zainab bint Jahash, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, said, today, and this was really interesting, she said the Prophet ﷺ came to her in a state of fear. Fear is not a state of the Prophet. The Prophet ﷺ only feels fear because the Yajuj and Majuj represent the punishment of Allah, you see. They represent the punishment and anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they are released upon the people. So that's why he was faza', you know. And he said, today, this Futiha al-Yawm, Radmu, Yajuj, wa Majuj, we've got the Arabic there, right? Futiha al-Yawm, today it's been opened. The barrier of Yajuj and Majuj has been opened, and he made that symbol. So this was a key hadith which Imran Hossein was using to say, look, the barrier was broken in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. So I have refrained here from saying that this hadith is mutawatir, because I don't know if it is or not, but all I've said is, even within Bukhari and Muslim, we can see it's come from multiple chains. So if it's not mutawatir, it's extremely close to that certainty, you know. An interesting thing happened following from that. One day I wanted to read more about Yajuj and Majuj, because this thing was in my head now about the white world order and everything. So I thought to myself, let me read some of the commentaries on the hadith about Yajuj and Majuj. So I went onto my, my digital library, and I wanted to read the commentary Fathul Bari, which is the most famous commentary on Bukhari by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, considered to be the best and most comprehensive commentary on Sahih al-Bukhari. So let me see what Ibn Hajar says in relation to the hadith about Yajuj and Majuj. But by mistake, instead of pressing Fathul Bari, I pressed on Faidul Bari, which is a commentary on Bukhari by Imam Anwar Shah Kashmiri, a much later scholar, one of our more recent scholars of the died in 1933, but one of the top respected ulama of the Indian subcontinent of his time. And he has this commentary which is very well known, Faidul Bari, on Bukhari. So I thought afterwards this is Qadar Allah, because it's just one of those things that doesn't happen by coincidence. Because when you open Faidul Bari, in his commentary on the Yajuj and Majuj hadith, he also says exactly the same thing that Sheikh Imran was saying. He says that the barrier was broken during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, as is proven by those hadiths of Zainab bint Jahash and others. So Imam Anwar Shah is clearly a very respected scholar, a world famous scholar of Al-Sunnah. He has got, he's obviously come before Sheikh Imran Hossein with this exact same conclusion on the barrier being broken. And he specifically says that these are the British and the Russians. Because in those days, don't forget, the British and the Russian empires were the two great world powers that had taken over between them most of the world. So he said these are, he says it would not be far-fetched to say that these are Britain and Russia, and these people were released during the lifetime of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I was like, subhanallah, and he specifically addresses some of because he's a hadith master, don't forget. So he brings some of the other hadith that people may have come across that seem to contradict this conclusion. So for example, in Tirmidhi, there's a hadith that many people know about, in which every day Yajuj and Majuj are digging through the barrier until they come almost to breach the barrier, and then it becomes night time, and then they say, let's go. And they come back the next day, but then Allah has sealed up the barrier again, so they start from scratch. Yeah, you've heard of the hadith? So Imam Anwar Shah, he says this hadith, he basically dismisses this hadith. Why? Because he says we've got much stronger hadith, which is the hadith mentioned before, where the Prophet ﷺ said that it's been breached. That's directly contradicting the other hadith in Tirmidhi, isn't it? You can't have both ways, that they almost breach it, but then it's covered every day until Allah. He said it's been breached now. They're out. Not they're out, but he said it's been breached. So he says in a case like this, we have to take, there's no way to that they both can be correct. So we have to take the stronger evidence. He discusses it further. Ibn Kathir deems this narration weak. Abu Hurairah sometimes says it's from the Prophet ﷺ, and sometimes he says it's from Ka'b. So it's not even always attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. And some people argue that it's actually not from the Prophet. So this is how he dismisses the hadith from Tirmidhi. So then I started thinking, look, a lot of this is making sense to me now. Dajjal is coming, we can see that. When Prophet Isa ﷺ kills Dajjal and the army that are with him, this is when the Yajuj and Majuj, which is America, and these Western powers will then come in full force against Prophet Isa ﷺ and the believers that are with him. Because he's killed their leader, Dajjal. Now, further on, Sheikh Imran Hossein argues that there are indications that there is a close relationship between the Yajuj and Majuj and the Dajjal. And this tafsir of this ayah, this really like mind boggled me, when I read this first time in Sheikh Imran Hussein's book. I was absolutely astounded. Yeah. This is the hadith, this is the ayahs in Surah Al-Anbiya that we mentioned before about Yajuj and Majuj. Remember it says, وَحَرَامٌ عَلَى قَرْيَةٍ أَحْلَقْنَاهَا أَنَّهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ. It is haram, it is forbidden upon a town that we have destroyed, that they cannot return. It is forbidden that they will ever return. Until Yajuj and Majuj are released and they come down from every elevated place or every hill. Now obviously whenever I had read this ayah until that time, the way I had read it and the way that all of us mostly read it is that if Allah ever destroys any town, people can never return to that town until the Day of Judgment, really. Yeah? Does that make sense? That's how it's normally understood. But there's a big problem with that understanding, because the next ayah says, حَتَّى إِذَا فُتِحَتْ يَجُوجُ وَمَجُوجُ. They cannot return until Yajuj and Majuj are released, but Yajuj and Majuj are released before Yawm al-Qiyamah. So how some of the Mufassirun then understood that, to try to make sense of that. They say, how does that make sense? That if Allah has destroyed a township, they can never return until Yajuj. We have to take this as meaning, not literally when Yajuj and Majuj are released. We have to take it as meaning symbolically. In other words, Yajuj and Majuj are a symbol of the last day. So when Allah says here, until Yajuj and Majuj are released, what he actually means is the Day of Judgment. In a symbolic way.
You put a town.
Yeah.
Does that refer to many towns or one town?
But this is the problem. In Arabic, it can refer to either way.
Yeah.
It can mean either thing. Because in Arabic, it just says qaryatin, indefinite. There's no al, so it's not the town. It can either mean a town, or in the context, it could mean any town. In the Arabic, it could mean a town, or it could be. But because when we say a town, we can mean any town. If I give you a pencil, don't ever give it to me back. In other words, if I give you any pencil, don't ever give me. I'm not talking about a particular pencil, am I? So that's how I would naturally read it. Yeah. But what Imran Hussein said here, he said the Qarya here is Jerusalem. It's not any town, it's a particular town. Jerusalem. And subhanAllah. As he pointed out himself, Jerusalem is referred to as a town in another ayah of Quran. In Surah Al-Baqarah. أو كالذي مر على قرية وهي خاوية على عروشها. When he passed by a town which was in ruins, and this is referring back to one of the prophets, and when he was passing by Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is referred to as qaryatin, a town, in this ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah. So there was a precedent for it in the Quran itself, you see. So it says, haramun ala qaryatin, it is forbidden upon a town, Jerusalem, that we have destroyed, that they will never return. The people who were destroyed, the Jews will never return to Jerusalem until Yajuj and Majuj are released. وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ هَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. And they come down from every place. In other words, when they have established their world rule, only then will those people return to Jerusalem, the Jews. Like, subhanAllah. Because that is what happened, isn't it? When these people established their world rule when the Ottoman Empire was destroyed, the final Muslim power. That's when the Jews then were returned to Jerusalem after centuries, after over 1,000 years. We're going to have a quick look at the historical. So this is the history. It was the Romans in 70 CE who destroyed the temple and expelled the Jews. They were literally, they were expelled, they were forbidden at that time. That was the ban. That they cannot return, they cannot live in Jerusalem. This was obviously the second destruction of the temple, but we don't need to go into that now. So it's interesting though, the Romans are very important in the Quran. The Quran mentions there's a whole surah. So the Romans are the ones who surrounded the city and they basically destroyed the Jews in the year 70. The Jews were a subject people to the Romans anyway, but they had been rebelling and things like that. So the Romans got fed up of them and they basically destroyed the temple, chucked them out of the city. And since that time, the Jews were scattered around the world. The diaspora, the Jewish diaspora, it was called, never had a homeland of their own. Right? And they were only returned by the British Empire after the defeat of the Ottomans. So this was then beginning to come into place for me anyway. I still didn't understand about the barrier, and Imran Hossein was talking about, this, what he calls this mysterious European obsession with Jerusalem, which goes all the way back to the Crusades. Yeah? All the way back to the birth, if you remember back to the history course. That Europe actually defines itself, it is actually born during the Crusades. That is the birth of Europe, Western Europe as a civilization. At that time, it was a Roman Catholic civilization in Western Europe. So the Crusades were all about capturing Jerusalem. They were had this almost like a very, very strong desire, that they need Jerusalem. And Imran Hossein was saying, why, because Christians had been going to Jerusalem for many centuries before that. There were many Christians living in Jerusalem under the Muslim empires. There were many other Christian communities, but these certain Western Europeans, the Roman Catholic Europeans, they suddenly seem to have this complete crazy obsession with getting Jerusalem. So anyway, to summarize so far, Yajuj and Majuj are behind an iron barrier built by Dhul-Qarnayn. The barrier is destroyed during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, and they are released. They assimilate, and somehow these Yajuj and Majuj, when they're released, they assimilate and infiltrate Western European countries. And ever since that time, they've become obsessed with Jerusalem. What Sheikh Imran is saying, he's got a colourful language, this mysterious and whatever obsession with the Holy Land. And eventually, after many centuries, when this Western European people, after literally, centuries, they eventually do form a world rule, they will then return the Jews to the Holy Land. So some of the hadiths that link up Yajuj and Majuj with Jerusalem as well, we saw that before. Yeah, that was in Sahih Muslim. That they will go towards Bayt al-Maqdis specifically. I think it's interesting how the hadith also mentioned that when they have killed or taken over all the people of the earth, they will turn towards the heaven. They will become such a global power that we've got nothing else to do on this earth, let's turn towards the heaven. Which is exactly what we see from Western civilization. Now they're obsessed with getting to the moon, getting to Mars. They're finished here, they're finished. I personally think that's just, remember these are Sahaba narrating according to their understanding at the time. So I'm not taking everything here literally, but I'm just looking at the themes and the meanings. And this is something that's come in the, if you remember in several of the hadith, that when they've completed their domination of the earth, they will turn towards the heaven and try to shoot arrows. They're trying to, they're trying to penetrate and trying to, let's spread our dominion further towards the heaven as well. And also that thing that, these are going to be a people that Allah releases that no one can defeat. Since 1066, the Norman conquest of Britain, this country has never been defeated. It's never been invaded. No one's ever been able to defeat the British. Even if you look at the empire, when they left all of their colonies, they were never defeated. They left on their own terms. They left on their own terms. With their puppet governments and all of that stuff. Identity, now,